They dropped the reservoir at night. By morning, the shoreline looked flayed. Ribbons of slick clay, ribs of saplings, a necklace of stranded fish still twitching like lost coins. Gulls wheeled and scolded over the easy harvest. Where the lake had been a mirror, there was now a bruise. I came because of a letter. No return address, just a single line in blue ink. When the water recedes, go to the bell tower. There had been a village here before the dam. People were paid to move. Houses dismantled. Graveyard lifted and replanted a safe mile away. The bell tower had been left. Too risky to pull down, someone said. The subsoil was unstable. The foundations braided like veins. They let it drown last, a gray tooth swallowed by the green. Now it stood naked in the muck, a crooked spike with black windows and a mouth missing half its teeth. Above it stretched an exhausted blue that didn't look like sky so much as a tarp pulled tight. I parked by the windbreak and dragged on rubber boots. By the third step the mud climbed to my ankles and clung like a forgiving animal that would bite if I slipped. The air carried the metal sour tang of rotted reeds. Halfway out I found half a door. Red paint, peeled and scabbed. Standing on its own as if someone had politely removed it from a house that no longer existed. Inside the bell tower the air felt wet to the touch. Stones sweated. Ropes of gray mold hung like dead kelp. Far above, something pinged. A drop? A shard sighing in the draft? I stood still because stillness here taught you things. First, about yourself. How loudly you breathe, how boots complain at the knee. Then about the place. You can almost hear how it sounded when the bell lived, when laughter smacked the arch, when surnames knocked politely on wood. Only after that did the present begin to introduce itself, shy and certain. Footsteps. Below me. In the cellar. The letter in my pocket felt like a small warm body. I'd come as told, go to the bell tower, but the letter hadn't said what to do once I arrived. That omission felt deliberate. A stair hugged the wall down. The treads were slick, carved twice. Once by a mason's chisel, again by years of water worrying its way through. On the fifth step lay a pottery shard, blue wave pattern dotted with tiny eyes. On the eighth a key plain iron, no tag, as if it had shed its memory. At the bottom there were two doorways. Left, swollen wood, breathing a sweet, stale heat like a granary. Right. A stone throat narrowed to a few feet, the floor immediately becoming a sheet of black water. The surface didn't ripple. In it I could see a reflection that wasn't my phone's light but a broader, whiter plane. If memory had a look, it would have looked like that. Hello, I called. The echo came back like a tide. Low, low, low. Something scratched gently on the inside of the wooden door. Rat, I thought first, no water, plenty of food. Then a faint, deliberate tapping. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 knocks again. My hand was already on the iron key. Absurd. What lock could it fit? There was no keyhole, just a bar and a swollen latch. I leaned shoulder and patience against the wood. The door moved with a sandy sigh. The room beyond smelled warm and dry, as if grain had once lived here. Felt at once like a secret shared too late. It was a ringer's room, or that's what I decided to call it. Benches along 2 walls. A narrow window. On the floor, coils of rope. They looked newly laid, but when I pressed my fingers to the strands a fine grit whispered up. Silt from a time when rope bit the bell's neck and taught the bronze to speak. A girl sat on one of the benches. 11, maybe, wet hair stringing into tails. Wrists thin as reeds. She studied the floor and worried the hem of a faded blue smock. The shard's pattern came back to me. You? I didn't finish, because when she looked up, what reflected in her eyes wasn't my phone's cold LED but a bell. Not visible in the room, only the shadow of its rim trembling. The water's gone, she said, as if reciting attendance. Now it's allowed. Allowed what? She lifted one shoulder, a brief, subterranean gesture like folding a wing. To return. Or the opposite. I didn't know how to talk to ghosts. I wasn't even sure she was one. The tower hadn't offered anything supernatural so far except the sense of being watched by something with good posture. Did you write the letter? No, I don't write letters. She nodded at the ropes. I know how to ring. I took a half step nearer. My fingers moved before I did, as if they were hounds working a scent. Touching the rope felt indecent, like laying a hand on a scar. To call? I asked the dark rather than her. To open, she said. A bell is always a door. Didn't you know? Something walked the corridor outside. 2 sets of steps, mine and someone else's, perfectly synchronized, perfectly absent. I looked toward the entrance. The door had changed, or I had. A third, narrow panel had appeared alongside, too slim for a person but wide enough for a voice. Who do you want? The girl asked, studying my face as if there were writing between my eyes. I can call the one who means back to you. I said nothing. Names are leashes. Once you speak them, you allow yourself to be led. Then I'll ring the first, she said simply, and took hold of the nearest rope. Sound didn't bloom. It happened. Stone flexed. The water in the stone throat arched like a cat. Gulls rose gabbing from the new shore. It wasn't a tone so much as a field passing through bone, proposing new rules. Cold laced my shoulders. My phone blinked from half-charge to none. For a second, before it died, the screen showed a shape, not an icon. A profile I had tried to remember every year from a different angle so the pain would feel new. He'll be hungry, the girl said, almost apologetic. They all are where they are. Not for food. For names. Too many here, not enough there. I sat. The bench exhaled. Sitting felt correct. Standing pretends you might leave. People don't leave from here, they come through, or else the sound drinks them back. If I open, and he comes, will there be more of them here? No. She shook her head. He'll just stop echoing there. I wanted to ask her to ring someone lighter, easier in the mouth. But a shadow appeared in the doorway. Not human, not animal, the kind of outline old books call a drawing out. It moved with the patience of someone who no longer lifts his feet because he has forgotten how. She tossed me a strap of leather. Hold tight. When it gets very quiet, don't speak. When it gets very loud, don't cover your ears. Just don't look away from the bzell. From what? She smiled, shy and stubborn like a student mispronouncing truth into being. Bell is what people hear. Bzell is what is. When she pulled the second rope, I felt myself falling forward though my body stayed still. What fell was the edge. The doorway went white. Not clarity white, but colorless white, as if a page had been placed over the world. The shadow slid into the light and hung across the threshold like a wet shirt. The smell that came with it was fish ice left too long in sun. Along the floor a narrow skin of water shivered. A memory that hadn't dried with the night. That isn't him, the girl said. That's the first. And mine. She nodded to the strap in my fist. The fibers warmed under my palm. A pulse touched my skin. A rhythm I'd learned long ago on other wrists, counting beats with 2 fingers where small bones ladder under the skin. If you name him, he'll come, she said, eyes on the absent bell. But a word is a hook. It snags not only him. It snags you. From the seam between door and stone, a hand felt its way in thin, long-fingered, the hands of someone who remembers oars, patted the air like a blind cat, then stilled, locating me. The fingers curled, and something without shape answered from the rafters. A second peal. This time it spoke my name, shifted, a vowel changed, so it was me but printed on the reverse. I didn't answer. I wanted to step forward, but the waterline at the threshold made a mirror of the floor, and in that mirror lay a face that disliked being stepped on. When he stands here, don't touch, the girl said. Don't look away. Let him become sound. The strap bit little maps into my hands. My ears emptied. Not quiet but pre-ringing. A room yawning to make space. In the white rectangle a figure gathered itself. Tall, a little stooped, jacket with shiny elbows. I knew him stupidly well, from creases in the trousers, from the market-stitched plaid shirt carried across a courtyard that always smelled of damp potatoes. He lifted his head, and the room rang a third time. The sound rolled through me like a tide under the skin. It wasn't loud. It was deep, as if the floorboards had decided they were a drumhead and my bones the sticks. The girl didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the threshold, her lips pressed together as if holding in a name. The figure in the doorway took a step forward. The white glare clung to him, so details bled and wavered. A shape remembered through old glass, warped by water. His face was wrong in small ways. Nose narrower. Eyes too deep in their sockets. I recognized the jacket, though corduroy worn smooth at the elbows, cuffs fraying into soft tassels. He stopped just shy of the waterline. I noticed his feet weren't touching the mud. They hovered half an inch above it, toes flexing in slow rhythm, as if feeling for a surface that wasn't there. "Don't speak," the girl whispered without looking at me. I wanted to. I wanted to say his name, to ask where he'd gone, why he'd left. My throat moved anyway, a muscle memory that didn't care about warnings. I swallowed hard and kept still. The shadow at his back shifted. It wasn't attached to him. It clung to the doorway like something deciding whether to step through. The air between them shimmered, and I realized it wasn't shadow at all but water. Standing upright, shaped like the absence of a person, held in place by nothing I could see. The man's head turned toward it. The motion was stiff, like a marionette being tested after years in a box. The girl's hand tightened on the rope. "Third is to open," she murmured. "Fourth is to bind." The bell or bzel spoke again. Not a chime this time, but a breath made of stone and metal. The sound passed through the man, and as it did, parts of him blurred, thinning, until I could see the wall through his ribs. The hovering feet drifted lower, dipping into the waterline. That's when I felt it, the pull. Not from him, but from behind me. It was subtle at first, like leaning too close to a fan. Then stronger, tugging at my shirt, my breath, the inside of my skull. My vision tilted toward the stairwell, toward the stone throat I'd ignored when I came in. The black surface there was no longer flat. It bulged upward, a slow, deliberate swelling, as if something beneath it had decided it wanted to see. The girl yanked the rope once, hard. The bell's tone flared sharp, almost angry. The pull lessened, but it didn't stop. "Don't turn," she said. "If you look at it, it learns your outline." The man in the doorway lifted his head again. For the first time, his eyes met mine. I saw something in them, not recognition exactly, but memory's cousin. The kind that wakes you at night, not sure whether you dreamed of someone or had actually seen them in the hallway. The water shadow behind him shivered, then reached forward, touched his shoulder, and he staggered like it weighed tons. The girl pulled again, but softer this time, coaxing instead of commanding. His lips moved. No sound came out. Then, faint, almost eaten by the air, I heard my name. Not the one anyone here used. Not the name in the letter. The old name. It was enough. I stepped forward. The girl's hand shot out, catching my sleeve. "If you cross, you won't come back the same." The pull from behind grew teeth. I could feel it now in my teeth, my eyes, the roots of my nails. The water in the stone throat was climbing the walls without spilling, defying every law I trusted since childhood. The man extended his hand. The water shadow's fingers mirrored his, a fraction too slow, like it was remembering the gesture from a description. "Fourth," the girl hissed, and pulled the rope hard. The sound cracked the air. The man froze mid-step. The water shadow writhed like smoke in wind. The pull behind me snapped, leaving an emptiness so sudden it hurt. Then silence. The white glare at the doorway collapsed inward, folding into itself until there was nothing but the wood frame. Both man and shadow were gone. Only the smell of fish ice lingered. The girl let go of the rope and exhaled. "He's bound to the tower again. Until the next drawdown." I turned toward the stone throat. The black water was flat once more. I couldn't tell if it had ever moved at all. "You didn't name him," she said. "That's good." I didn't answer. I was still hearing my name in that wrong old way, stretched across the inside of my skull like a drying net. The girl coiled the rope and set it gently against the wall, as if the bell itself might bruise if she were careless. "You can't stay here tonight," she said. "The tide will shift again before dawn." I glanced toward the front door, the warped wood still wet with what I now realized wasn't rain. Outside, The light had gone green. That strange, bruised hue the air takes on before a storm, except there were no clouds. The waterline had risen, creeping up the steps like it was climbing on purpose. "Where do we go?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes tracked the dark stone opening in the floor, the stone throat, as I'd already started calling it in my mind. "Not far," she said finally. "Just below. It's safer when you're closer to it than when you're above." That made no sense. But then, nothing had since I'd stepped into the village. She led me to the far side of the room, where a narrow door crouched behind the bell's support beams. I wouldn't have noticed it at all if she hadn't ducked toward it. The handle was cold, too cold, like it had been stored in ice. She pushed it open and the smell rolled out first. Brine, metal, and something faintly sweet, like fruit left to rot in the sun. The staircase beyond was narrow and steep. The walls weren't plaster or brick. They were slick stone, wet to the touch. I could hear water moving below, but it wasn't the sound of waves or tide. This was more deliberate, almost like breath. She started down without looking back. I followed, my hand skimming the wall for balance. It pulsed faintly under my palm. Halfway down, we passed a small alcove. Inside was a table. On the table, a row of glass jars, each filled with the same thick black water I'd seen in the stone throat. Something pale floated in each, shapes like folded hands, curled tight. "Don't look at those," she murmured, though she was already past them. The air grew heavier as we descended, pressing on my ears until I swallowed to pop them. The steps ended at another door, this one metal, riveted and corroded but still solid. She paused, resting her fingers on the latch. "If it speaks to you, don't answer. And if you see anything that looks like your shadow but isn't connected to you, step away." Before I could ask, she unlatched the door and pushed it open. The room beyond wasn't a room at all. It was a flooded chamber, water up to our knees, the surface dark and glossy. Thick pillars rose from the depths to vanish into shadow above. Between them, faint lights drifted, not reflections, but slow, deliberate glows that slid along the water as if hunting. In the center of the chamber, on a low platform, stood another door. Wood. Ordinary. Out of place. It was shut. I didn't want to go near it, but the girl was already wading toward it. Each step she took made no ripples. Mine did. "That's the gate," she said, glancing over her shoulder at me. "When it opens, the tide changes everywhere at once." Her hand brushed the doorframe. Something inside the wood exhaled. The lights in the water turned toward us. The girl's fingertips lingered on the grain as though she were feeling for a heartbeat. "There's always something on the other side," she said softly, but never the same thing twice. The water around the platform stilled. The faint lights drifting beneath its surface clustered in a loose ring, circling without touching. I could hear them faintly, a kind of low electrical hum like power lines in wet wind. She looked at me. "When it breathes out, it's safe to enter. If it breathes in, you won't make it back through." Before I could ask how I was supposed to tell the difference, the door shivered. Not from any wind. The air here was heavy and still, but from something behind it pressing forward. A seam of black water appeared along the edges, beating into droplets that ran up instead of down. A soft rush of air pushed against my face. It smelled faintly of rust and old paper. "That's out," she said, and pushed the door open. The space beyond wasn't bright or dark. It was deep, like looking into a well filled with air, the bottom lost somewhere beyond sight. The walls were wrong. Not flat, not curved. They folded and unfolded as I watched, like a lung inflating in slow motion. She stepped inside without hesitation, her boots leaving no marks on the pale floor that appeared under her feet. I hesitated on the threshold. The hum from the water behind me sharpened into a crackle. I glanced back. The lights had risen, breaking the surface now, small globes no larger than a fist, each holding something that writhed against the glassy membrane. "Close the door," she called from ahead. Her voice echoed in the space too many times, each repetition a little slower, a little more tired. I stepped through and pulled it shut. Instantly, The sound of the water vanished. The air here was dry, the smell of rust replaced by something colder. Ozone, maybe, or the air just before lightning hits. The floor wasn't quite level. It sloped downward into the depths, vanishing into a pale fog that seemed to carry its own light. The walls continued to flex subtly, and with each movement, I thought I saw shapes pressing out from the inside, hands, faces, things with too many joints, only to sink back in. "What is this place?" I asked. "It's where the low tide ends up," she said. "Everything it pulls away comes here first." She knelt and pressed her palm flat to the floor. After a moment, she lifted it. Her skin was dry, but in her hand she held a scrap of cloth, soaked in that same black water. From far ahead, deeper in the fog, something rang. Not a bell this time. Metal on metal. Slow. Deliberate. The girl's shoulders tightened. "We have to move before it knows we're here." We began walking down the slope. The fog swallowed the doorway behind us almost immediately, and with it, any sense of how far we'd come. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but the way back had dissolved into a flat, white nothing. The metal sound came again. Closer. And this time, I heard something else with it. A second sound, wet and dragging, like rope pulled from a river. The girl didn't look back. "Don't stop walking," she said. The air thickened with each step, the fog clinging to my skin like damp cloth. I could taste metal now, faint but constant, as if every breath carried a little rust. The dragging sound was steady, rhythmic. Whatever it wasn't rushing us. It was following at its own pace, confident it wouldn't lose the trail. I tried to match the girl's stride, but my boots felt heavier with each step, as though the floor wanted to keep me. The slope was almost imperceptible now, but I could feel it in my calves, always down, never flat. Shapes flickered in the fog around us. At first, I thought they were tricks of the light, but then one lingered long enough to make out. A chair, its legs half sunk into the floor. A child's tricycle, the paint peeled to bare metal. A door without a frame, standing upright and perfectly still. The girl ignored them all, her gaze fixed on the pale nothing ahead. "It's easier if you don't notice them," she murmured. The dragging grew louder. My shoulders tightened involuntarily. The sound wasn't behind us anymore, it was around us. Above. Below. We reached a point where the fog thinned slightly, revealing the floor ahead. It was different here, not pale stone, but a surface that looked almost like tar. The girl stopped at its edge. "We have to cross," she said, her voice low. "Don't run. Don't stand still. Just walk." I stepped onto the tar. It flexed under my weight, not like water, but like something that didn't want to be disturbed. The fog pressed close, and I had the sensation, irrational I told myself, that it was watching. Halfway across, the dragging stopped. Silence. Then, from the fog to my left, something shifted. At first, I thought it was just more of the strange debris. A post, maybe, or a bent tree. But then it bent the other way. Too smooth. Too deliberate. The shape resolved as it leaned into view. Tall, jointed wrong. Its limbs impossibly thin, like someone had stretched a shadow into flesh. Its head was a smooth curve, featureless except for a single vertical slit that pulsed faintly with each breath. It didn't step closer. It simply adjusted its stance, and the dragging sound started again. Not from its feet, but from what it carried. A length of chain, black with wet, trailing into the fog behind it. The girl's voice was tight but steady. "Don't look at its hands." I didn't want to look at anything, but my eyes betrayed me. They were empty. Not missing, empty. Each hand was a hollow, perfectly circular hole, as if the space where flesh should be had been scooped out. The edges were lined with teeth. Small, human teeth. The chain jerked once. Something deep in the fog answered. A groan, impossibly low, vibrating up through the tar into my bones. The girl's hand closed on my wrist, pulling me forward. "It's not for us," she said. "Not yet." We stepped off the tar onto pale stone again. The thing in the fog didn't follow, but the dragging sound kept pace. The stone felt colder now, almost brittle underfoot. The fog didn't thin, but the light within it shifted. from pale gray to something with a faint green cast, like water over deep weeds. The chain's rattle was louder, even though the figure with the hollow hands had vanished back into the mist. The sound was ahead of us now, not behind, pulling us forward whether we wanted to go or not. We reached a ridge. The slope simply broke away into emptiness. The girl stopped at the edge, peering down. I moved beside her and saw it. The floor far below was covered in water, but not calm. The surface shuddered with each pull of the chain. The other end was anchored to something massive just under the surface, something whose shape I couldn't hold in my mind for more than a second without my stomach turning. "It's what the gate keeps out," she said, almost to herself. "But sometimes the tide changes wrong, and it finds its way here." The chain pulled again. Whatever it was moving toward the base of the ridge. And the ridge itself began to lean, stone groaning under the strain. "We need to go," I said. She nodded but didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the chain, and I realized she wasn't just watching it. She was counting. 3 pulls. Pause. 2 pulls. Pause. 4 pulls. Her lips moved silently, repeating the pattern. "It's the sequence for the lock," she said finally. "What lock?" She pointed past me. I turned, and there it was, half hidden in the fog. A door set into the side of the ridge. Not wood this time, not metal, but something that looked grown rather than built, its frame twisting like roots. As we approached, I noticed the door had no handle. Just a series of raised ridges along one side, worn smooth in places. The girl pressed them in the same pattern she'd counted from the chain. The ridges shifted. The door side open, releasing a gust of air so cold my teeth ached. Inside was a staircase spiraling down. The walls glistened with moisture, and a faint hum, like the one from the water chamber, drifted up from below. She stepped in first, but hesitated on the second step. "Once we go down," she said, "we can't come back up this way." Behind us, the ridge groaned again. The chain's rattle quickened. We went down. The steps were slick, each one shallow enough to make me uneasy. The hum grew stronger, threading into my bones. My vision swam at the edges, and the air tasted of copper. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a wide chamber. The floor was dry, but a shallow trench ran through the center, filled with black water. The trench disappeared into 2 archways, one to the left, one to the right. In the center of the room stood a post, and from it hung dozens of smaller chains, each tipped with a bell. None of them moved. None of them rang. The girl exhaled slowly. "This is where it listens." Before I could ask what she meant, one of the bells shivered. Just once. Something in the black water answered. The bell's chime was small, almost delicate, like a fingernail tapping glass. But in the stillness of the chamber, it rang loud enough to make my teeth hurt. The black water in the trench reacted instantly. A ripple moved along its length, not outward but inward, as though the liquid were pulling itself toward the source of the sound. I took a step back. The girl didn't move. Her gaze stayed fixed on the bell that had moved. "It's not for us," she whispered. "Not yet." The ripple reached the post and stopped. For a moment, everything was still again. Then the opposite archway, the one leading right, exhaled. It wasn't air that came out. It was a sound, low and deep, more felt than heard. The water in the trench quivered. Another bell moved. This time, it didn't just tremble. It rang. A longer tone that seemed to carry words hidden beneath it. I couldn't make them out, but I felt them, like whispers pressed directly into my skull. "What's it saying?" I asked. The girl's voice was tight. "It's telling them we're here." Before I could ask who them was, the trench darkened even further. Shapes began to rise from it, thin and segmented, glistening wet. At first I thought they were eels, but then I saw the joints. Fingers. Too many fingers. They didn't climb out. They just rested along the edge, as if testing the air. The third bell rang. Louder. Sharper. This time, the black water surged in both directions, vanishing into the archways. The girl grabbed my arm. "We have to answer." She reached for one of the bells and struck it gently with her fingertip. The sound was bright, clear, nothing like the others. The water froze mid-ripple. From the left archway came an echo of the tone. But it wasn't an exact copy. More like someone imitating it from far away. The girl listened, nodded once, and rang the bell again, altering the pitch by the smallest fraction. The imitation answered. It went back and forth like that, a strange conversation in tones and echoes. The longer it went on, the more the fingers along the trench withdrew, sliding back into the black. Finally, the girl let the bell go. The hum in the air faded. The water stilled. She looked at me. It bought us time, that's all. I glanced toward the archways. The fog was creeping in through both, low to the ground. What's through there? I asked. Her eyes lingered on the left path. The way deeper. Then on the right. And the thing they keep chained. Another faint rattle echoed from somewhere far below. She stepped toward the left archway without looking back. We don't want to meet it. The archway's edges were slick, the stone worn into shapes that didn't look like they were made by tools. I avoided touching them as we passed through. The fog beyond was thicker, tinted faintly green like the air before a storm. The floor sloped again, but this time it wasn't smooth. Long grooves cut through the stone, as though something massive had been dragged along here over and over. Each was filled with stagnant black water that reflected nothing at all. Our footsteps echoed strangely. The sound didn't bounce back the way it should. It seemed to be swallowed and replaced by something softer, like breathing. The girl moved quickly, never letting her eyes linger on the grooves. Don't step in them, she said. Why? She didn't answer. After a while, I noticed the walls had changed. At first, they were just rough stone. But now they were etched with carvings, lines, circles, interlocking shapes that reminded me of maps. Some were deep, others barely scratched in, as if they'd been added over centuries. I slowed to look closer. The circles weren't just symbols, they were doors. Dozens of tiny doors, each sealed, carved into the wall as though waiting to be opened. They're all closed, I said. For now, she replied. The breathing sound grew louder. Not from behind us, from ahead. We reached a chamber where the grooves converged into a single trench. The black water here was deeper, wide enough that I couldn't see the other side clearly. Something stirred below the surface, distorting the reflectionless void. Across the trench stood a gate. It was massive, made of some dark material that looked like iron but moved slightly, like it was breathing. Thick chains crisscrossed its face, vanishing into the walls. This is it, she said quietly. The second lock. I looked at her. What happens if it opens? Her eyes flicked to the trench. You saw the hands. A slow, rhythmic creak came from the gate, like something testing its weight against the chains. The trench rippled, and for a moment, I thought I saw a pale shape just under the surface. Too big to be human, too slow to be anything I wanted to name. She stepped closer to the edge and crouched, pulling a small metal rod from her coat. She dipped it into the water and stirred once. The breathing stopped. The gate stilled. She looked back at me. We have to cross while it's listening to me. The trench had no bridge, just a narrow strip of stone along one wall, barely wide enough for a foot. You go first, she said. Don't stop. Don't look down. I stepped onto the ledge, pressing my back against the cold wall. The water below was silent, but I felt it. Something just beneath me, pacing. Halfway across, I heard the chains on the gate groan again. And then, something surfaced. Not fully, just enough for me to see that it had an eye. A single, unblinking eye the size of my head, pale and cloudy like it had been underwater too long. It watched me as I crossed the last few feet. When I stepped onto solid ground again, the eye slid back beneath the black. The girl joined me moments later, tucking the metal rod away. It remembers faces, she said. The breathing started again, louder now, behind the gate. The breathing from behind the gate was no longer slow or steady. It had a pulse to it now, like the sound of waves hitting a breakwater. The girl froze halfway through the next sentence she was about to say. Her head tilted slightly, listening. Then came the first metallic scream. The chains on the gate jerked, taut enough to spray flecks of black water into the air. The sound echoed through the chamber, a deep groan layered with something sharper, almost like laughter. She grabbed my sleeve. It's pushing too soon. That's wrong. I didn't have time to ask what she meant. Another chain snapped tight, sending a vibration through the floor that rattled my teeth. One of the hooks embedded in the wall pulled loose with a sound like bone tearing. The girl ran to the side of the chamber, scanning the carved walls until she found a shallow alcove. In here now, I followed, squeezing into the narrow space. The stone was cold against my back, slick with condensation. From here, I could see the entire gate, the chains thrashing, the surface of the trench boiling with unseen movement. A shadow passed across the gate from the other side. Not a shape, just absence, like the light itself bent to avoid it. "That's not the one they chained," she whispered. Before I could process that, the far left chain snapped. The sound it made wasn't metal breaking. It was something alive, something screaming in pain. The gate buckled inward. The surface rippled. And then, an arm slid through the gap. At least I thought it was an arm. It was jointed like one, but too long, and it moved as though it had more than one elbow. The skin, if you could call it that, was a pale, wet membrane stretched over something skeletal. It scraped the floor, feeling its way toward the trench's edge. The fingers ended not in nails, but in hooked points that scraped sparks from the stone. The girl pressed a finger to her lips. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear, with recognition. Another chain tore free. The gate yawned wider. Now I could see the head forcing itself through the gap. Featureless, except for a vertical split down the center, shivering like it was tasting the air. The split widened, revealing rows of tiny, chattering teeth inside. The girl leaned close to my ear. "If it gets through, it won't stop here. It'll keep going until it finds the surface. What do we do?" Her eyes flicked to the carvings on the walls, the dozens of small, closed doors. "We open one." I stared at her. "We don't know where they lead." She smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Anywhere is better than here." The next chain snapped. She stepped out of the alcove and pressed her palm to one of the carved doors. The stone trembled, the lines of the carving glowing faintly. Behind us, the thing forced more of its body through the gap, the trench water surging violently now. The chattering teeth had become a steady, eager grind. The carved door in the wall cracked open, spilling pale light into the chamber. "Go!" she shouted. I didn't hesitate. The light spilling from the carved door wasn't steady. It shimmered, like sunlight through moving water, but colder, the kind of cold that prickles the skin and makes your breath feel heavy. I ducked inside. For a moment, I thought we'd stepped into open air. The space beyond was vast, filled with shifting mist, and the floor beneath my feet was smooth and warm, like polished stone that had been absorbing heat for hours. But then I realized the mist was moving in currents. Slow at first, then with sharper swirls, like something unseen was passing just beneath it. The girl came through behind me, sealing the carved door with a push. The glow from its edges died, leaving us lit only by the faint blue-white haze drifting through the air. "What is this place?" I asked. She took a moment before answering. "Not a room. Not exactly. More like the space between them." The floor curved upward on both sides, disappearing into the mist. Far ahead, I could make out a series of tall shapes. Pillars, maybe, though they seemed to bend slightly as I stared at them, as if refusing to be fixed in one form. We walked. Each step sent a soft echo skittering out into the haze. First it was quiet. Then, faintly, the echoes began coming back wrong, delayed, distorted, layered with faint whispers that weren't ours. I slowed. The girl didn't. "Don't listen too closely," she said. "If you hear your own voice answering, it's not you." The pillars loomed closer. They weren't stone. They weren't even solid. They were woven thin strands of something black and slick, knotted together in spirals. Inside each spiral, the haze was thicker, swirling like it had been trapped. As we passed the first one, I saw movement inside the haze. A figure, Tall, unmoving, head bowed. I kept walking. The second pillar held another figure. This one faced outward, its face obscured, its hands pressed against the inner surface of the weave. I thought I saw its fingers twitch. What are they? I whispered. Things that stepped between too many times, she said. They don't all come back out. We passed a third. This one's face was clear, and it was mine. I froze. It was smiling. Keep moving, she said sharply. I did, though every instinct screamed to look back. The haze thickened again until the pillars were just shadows behind us. The floor began to slope downward. Ahead, the mist glowed faintly orange. That's the exit, she said. We stepped into the light and found ourselves in a stairwell. It was concrete, old, the paint on the walls bubbled and peeling. The air smelled of rust and wet dust. Somewhere far above, a single fluorescent bulb flickered. I looked down. The stairs spiraled into darkness. This leads back into the bunker, she said. I hesitated. The same bunker? She glanced over the railing, her face unreadable. Not exactly. The first flight of stairs was normal enough. Metal grating underfoot, the clang of each step echoing up into the dim bulb above. The second flight felt longer. The turns between landings stretched just a little too far. The shadows beneath the rails grew thicker, refusing to reveal the floor below. By the third flight, I started counting steps. 14 to the landing, 12 down the next, 18 down the next. By the fifth flight, the numbers meant nothing. The girl kept moving without pause, her hand brushing the rusted rail like she was keeping herself tethered. Her boots made no more noise than my own breathing, which had grown too loud in my ears. Do you feel it yet? She asked without looking back. Feel what? That we've been here before. I almost said no, but then I realized I had seen that peeling patch of green paint before, the one shaped almost like a bird, the scorch mark on the wall just below it, the hairline crack running down the center of the next landing's floor. We reached the same bulb again. I knew it was the same because it buzzed in the exact same rhythm, a pattern I'd unconsciously memorized. How long does it loop like this? I asked. Until it decides you've changed, she said. Changed how? She didn't answer. The next time we passed the scorch mark, I stopped. That was when I noticed something different. Faint scratches on the wall near the floor, just where the shadows began to swallow the corner. 4 lines and a fifth crossing them through. Did you make these? I asked. She crouched, running her fingers over them. Not me. You. The metal grating groaned faintly beneath us. It wasn't the sound of weight, it was the sound of something breathing. From far below, a low thump echoed upward. Not a single noise, but rhythmic, like footsteps. Heavy ones. I leaned over the rail. The dark below wasn't empty anymore. Shapes moved in it, shifting in the gloom, climbing. The girl grabbed my arm. We have to break the loop before they get here. How? She pointed to the wall just above the scorch mark. Through there. It's concrete. It's not, she said. Not if you've been here enough times. Another thump shook the stairwell. The bulb flickered, and for an instant, the darkness below leapt several flights closer. I didn't argue. The scorch mark seemed ordinary enough up close, just blackened paint blistered over what looked like cracked concrete. But as I pressed my palm to it, the surface felt wrong. Not cold, like stone. Warm. Almost soft. Like there was something beneath it shifting just out of sync with my heartbeat. The girl pulled a short, flat piece of metal from her coat. It looked like part of a chisel, but the end was serrated, almost like teeth. She handed it to me. Push, she said. I set the serrated edge against the wall. It sank into the concrete far easier than it should have, like breaking the crust of old bread. The sound it made wasn't stone crumbling. It was wet. A thin, dark liquid oozed out around the tool, thick and warm, running down my hand. Keep going, she urged, glancing down the stairwell. I did, tearing a jagged line through the wall. The surface peeled back in long, curling strips that glistened like damp paper. Beneath it wasn't rebar or brick. It was black, fibrous, and faintly pulsing. Another thump echoed from below, closer now. The bulb above swayed slightly, though no wind touched it. The girl shoved her fingers into the tier and pulled hard. The fibrous layer gave way with a muffled, wet rip, revealing a void behind it. No room, no corridor, just darkness. A perfect, depthless black that seemed to pull at the edges of my vision. "Go," she said. I hesitated, leaning forward. The darkness wasn't empty. I could feel it, a faint hum like a heartbeat just at the edge of hearing. And something else, a smell. Not decay, not dust. More like rain on hot stone, sharp and metallic. The thumps below became pounding now, the shape of whatever was climbing close enough that I could see parts of it in the shadows. Pale joints, too many of them bending the wrong way. The girl pushed me. I fell forward into the black. There was no impact, just a sudden shift, like stepping from one temperature into another. The hum grew louder, surrounding me, filling my head until I thought my teeth would crack. Then I landed. I hit the ground hard enough to knock the air out of me, or whatever passed for air in this place. It wasn't solid ground. My palms sank slightly into it, like pressing into packed moss or muscle under thin skin. The surface gave just enough to make me afraid of what might happen if I pushed harder. The girl landed beside me without a sound. She rose, scanning the dim surroundings. The walls curved upward into darkness, their texture irregular and organic, as if carved by hands that didn't understand straight lines. Every so often, a slow pulse ran through them, sending a faint tremor through the ground. "This is it," she murmured. "The bunker's heart." I swallowed. "It's alive. Not the way you think." A low vibration rolled through the air, almost like the growl of a massive animal, but it came from everywhere at once. The walls seemed to lean closer. Ahead of us, the ground sloped upward toward a faint, reddish glow. The girl started walking. "We need to see the source. It might still be sleeping." "Might," I muttered but followed anyway. As we climbed, I began to see shapes along the walls, embedded objects. At first they looked like lumps, but then details emerged. A boot, a cracked helmet, half a door, all fused seamlessly into the living surface, as if swallowed and digested. Then I saw faces. Some were human, eyes closed, skin pale and tight. Others weren't. Their features were twisted into shapes that didn't belong in this world. All of them breathed faintly, in time with the slow rhythm of the walls. The girl didn't look at them. The reddish glow grew stronger until we reached the top of the slope. The space opened into a vast chamber, dominated by a single, massive structure at its center. A sphere, black and slick, pulsing with each vibration. Veins of dim red light ran across its surface, converging on a single vertical seam. I couldn't look at it without feeling the back of my skull ache. The girl approached it slowly. "This is the core lock. Break it and the gate above won't hold." My chest tightened. "And if we don't break it?" She glanced back at me, her expression unreadable. "Then it wakes up anyway, just slower." The pulse in the air quickened, as if it heard her. The girl stood a few feet from the seam in the black sphere, her head tilted as if she were listening to something only she could hear. The red veins across its surface brightened, pulsing faster, and the slow, steady vibration in the ground began to climb toward a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Only it wasn't my heartbeat. I stepped closer, but the air around the sphere was thicker, harder to breathe, like walking into invisible water. The edges of my vision swam. "How do you open it?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "You don't," she said without turning. "It opens when it wants you inside." That was when the seam flexed. Not a mechanical parting, not hinges or sliding plates. The surface stretched the way skin might stretch around a wound. The opening peeled back, revealing an interior not of gears or chambers, but of glistening red light and something moving within it. A sound escaped, low, wet, and resonant enough to vibrate in my chest. The girl looked over her shoulder at me. "Once we're in, there's no guarantee we can come back. Not to here. Not to anywhere." Before I could answer, something long and thin extended from the seam. A tendril, slick and glistening, tipped with a shape that almost resembled a hand. Stopped a few inches from my chest, hovering, waiting. "Don't touch it," she warned. But it was too late, it moved first. The tendril brushed against my sternum and I felt heat shoot through me. Not burning but filling. Like every nerve was being lit from the inside. Images flashed. Corridors folding into themselves. Oceans where the surface was above and below at once. Faces whispering my name in rooms I'd never seen. When my vision cleared, I was on my knees. The seam in the sphere was wider now, gaping open, the interior a swirling cavity of red light and twisting shapes that didn't seem to obey perspective. "It's inviting us," the girl said. Inviting. That wasn't the word I'd have chosen. Another vibration rolled through the chamber. Deeper this time, and accompanied by a faint, rhythmic clicking from somewhere far beyond the walls. I didn't ask what it was. I knew we were about to find out. She stepped into the sphere without hesitation. I followed. Crossing the threshold was like stepping through a membrane. The surface closed behind me without a sound, sealing us inside. The air, if it was air, was warmer, dense with a metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat. The floor was not flat. It sloped gently downward, slick under my boots, the texture like wet stone over muscle. Red light pulsed from deep within, not steady but in irregular waves, as though responding to some unseen motion. The girl walked ahead of me, her silhouette shifting strangely in the light, as if there were more than one of her, each slightly out of sync with the others. The corridor twisted in a way that made no sense. Sometimes it leaned left or right without bending. Sometimes it rose and fell at the same time. My stomach lurched at each turn, but she didn't slow down. "What's at the center?" I asked. "The memory of what built this," she said. "And maybe the thing itself." The pulse quickened. From the walls, I could hear faint murmurs. Voices speaking languages I didn't know, some so deep they felt like they rattled in my bones. We entered a chamber where the walls opened wider, curving upward into a dome. At the center stood a column of black liquid, suspended without a container. It twisted slowly, like smoke in water, though it was far too thick to be either. As I stepped closer, the surface of the liquid shimmered, and shapes began to form within it. I saw the stairwell, the scorch mark, the faces in the walls, the road that had led me here. Then I saw something else, the ocean, but upside down, its surface rippling above me while a shadow the size of a city moved below. The liquid flexed, and for a moment, I thought I saw my own face staring back at me. Only older, thinner, eyes hollow. The girl reached into the column without hesitation. Her hand sank in up to the wrist, and the surface closed around her arm like it was breathing. She turned to me. "If you want to leave with answers, you have to touch it. If you don't, it keeps you." "Where does it take you?" "Not where," she said. "When?" The pulse in the chamber deepened, and somewhere far above, something knocked, 3 times, heavy enough to make the floor tremble.